Getting the balance right in terms of getting your automation processes to work efficiently, but also not be overly complicated, is very difficult. The reality is automation will always be complicated because you've got to think through the what can go wrong, the what do we expect, what happens here, how do we handle that. Let's go through and look at what we've got to where we are now with our Parkrun data set. Okay, there's a lot going on there, and to be honest, it's one that I should probably still make more complicated, but I've taken the decision not to make it more complicated, but rather to handle the exceptions that are inevitable or that are going to happen manually and by manually intervening, because there's not the value add in going further. So let's go right on over and have a look and see what's going on. Parkrun data refresh really involves a couple of steps. So I thought let's start by just talking through those two main steps. So first off, we've got the main controller. This runs in the Power Automate desktop suite. And what it's doing is we're using the desktop architecture to allow us to do the screen scrapes and screen grabs that we need to actually read in the event data for each event. Okay. Once we've got that data into a spreadsheet format, it then is saved up through OneDrive for Business architecture into SharePoint. In SharePoint, it can then also be used to refresh the data flow. So we've got an online component that then goes through the same tracked events list and actually goes in and says, right, for each one, go and refresh its data set. We've got a couple of functions where basically it's calling the same components that do the actual screen scrape, and those are then treated just as functions. That's all we need to do for those. The online refresh part, as I say, we've got the pending bit, which is the last piece of the puzzle to do, which is we'll go in and actually put in place where it's only going to refresh ones that have updated. And by updated, what we mean is where the actual last event date is before the last refresh date. Really simple. So if an event takes place on Saturday, on the Sunday or later on Saturday, it should be available to trigger the refresh. If it hasn't taken place yet, or if the last event or the Saturday event didn't take place, then obviously we don't need to refresh the data because the last refresh is already after the last event. So we know we've got the latest data. So we've got that, and that'll just keep things a bit tighter because the full refresh at the moment takes a little bit too long. Although, as a real process that you would have in a business, nothing wrong with actually what it does. It's fine. So for this job, the first piece is really handled by a Power Automate desktop job. Okay, and it's broken down into 27 steps. A lot of those are kind of audit steps in terms of we need to go through and build variables up or do things just so that we can then track what's going on. We've got a couple of function steps in terms of we're going and we're running everything through a SharePoint list, which is really the controller. That controls everything else. That's our support function. So what we've got going on here really is it comes through. Let's start at the beginning. So we get our current date and time, which is all for our audit trail. It goes and puts something in. We get the items from the SharePoint list. Now this is the premium component. This is the one that causes this to be a paid license requirement as opposed to being able to just use the free. To get that SharePoint list, you have to have a paid license. The main thing as well is that if you want to automate this, you need to go all the way up to the full RPA side, which is even more expensive. So it's kind of, this is run manually, which is again why we haven't gone through to the full side. This is kind of run it Sunday morning, just deal with it. It's fine. Okay, we've got the objects we're going to get. We go through based on the SharePoint list. So what tracked events have we got? Let's go through each one. Get the event history. Again, we're calling another data flow, which is going to come through and pull those through. And then it goes through for each event within that, go through and get the records for it. And then what we're looking at the moment is there a way to get like the last 5 of them and just testing which one works. So we'll see what happens over this week and see how well that works. And then lastly, obviously, if it doesn't exist, go and make sure you've pulled it. And then we've got increment, so do while, then it waits 30 seconds. So we've gone through, we've done everything, let's wait 30 seconds and then let's do the next one. Firstly though, before it does the next one, it updates. So it updates that SharePoint list to say we've actually done something now to it. And what it updates is the last event date, which is what we're wanting to do. Because what we want to get to is where we've got the next stage of automation. Carries on going through, we write it into a log file, and then it shuts down the computer as well. Okay, so as everything goes on, nothing too crazy in here. Right? And it works pretty well. This has been rock solid now while it's running. The next step is what goes on here within, oh, this is still the Power Automate desktop, isn't it? So here we go. So in our Power Automate side, where we've got our flows, what we're needing to do, and this is what I'm going to be handing over, is this piece here, which again, this is why I'm saying the paid license to get it to actually run a data flow in the cloud. Now, this one here, this is an interesting one, because what I was trying to do is work out how we automate this. If we have a look here, if we pick a location, so say Jesmondine, let's open up the Jesmondine record and see what we've got here. So what we can see is we've got a folder location for it. We've got the URL, which is the Parkrun URL, which goes in for lots of things. How do we actually find stuff? How do we build up the URL so that you can go and get an individual Parkrunner's record for a particular location? We need that. Got latitude and longitude coordinates for it. Again, these are manually taken from Google Maps. Every event has Google Maps. We're just picking the start or the finish for that to kind of work out what do we do. Local authority. See, I've spelled that wrong. Authority. Then keep further down. The latest event number. This is key. So we've got kind of what's the latest event number for it. And again, I wasn't sure, do we need the latest event number? Do we need the latest event date? Practical terms, it's probably the latest event date. But the number was useful because it was the idea was to try and work out how do we get to that point where we're pulling for this, say we'd want from 214 to 219. Let's pull those fully. So in case there's any updates to results or volunteers or anything like that, we should kind of update those. That feels like that's right because I'm aware there's potentially a miss that we run our thing and then somebody updates results or something happens and we've missed something. So I'm conscious of that. And then we've got this last refresh date, which is going to be updated by the flow I'm going to show you. We've got the GUID. Okay, so the GUID is the GUID of the work of the data flow for the event. Okay. So what does this all look like? So what happens is in this flow, if we open this one where it's run through successfully, manually triggered, so we're going to get this triggered by our desktop flow. So it's the desktop flow before it shuts down is going to trigger this one. It gets the items from the SharePoint list. So we pull all the items from the list, and then we're going through and doing a for each loop, and then for each refresh the data flow. So we're triggering the data flow refresh based on the GUID for it. And we're updating the item to say, well, I've triggered the refresh. There we go. Updated the item. And then I'm pausing 10 minutes, right? Now, the reason for pausing 10 minutes is there isn't really a way of, well, there is, but it becomes, you're adding layers of complexity. We could talk about it. Should we do it? Should we not do it? At the moment, if a data flow refresh fails, I'll get an alert. The data flow refresh has failed. We can manually intervene. In the event that this went down that route, we have to put in all sorts of error handling and that. So what I've done is I've said, well, let's just wait 10 minutes. And that way, in theory, there should never be more than, say, 3 at most. For a limited period of time, you might have 4 refreshing at once. That's kind of the mindset. I'm trying to make sure that we don't have too much running through in a Power BI workspace in terms of the data flow refreshes that just inundates everything, slows everything down, and doesn't actually work. In practical terms, this takes about 4.5 hours to run because of that, but that feels like that's sensible. Then obviously that's why at the end we've got a pause of an hour. So we're waiting an hour after the final one's refreshed, is to make sure that everything is refreshed before we refresh the data set. At the moment, we're only refreshing the Newcastle data set, but the goal would very much be to, once we get all of these pulled through and everything working and do the validations, that we can then do our full regional Power BI data set, regional Parkrun data set, and have everything in there all coming through and made available. Okay? And which is why I'm saying this isn't a practical delay in terms of why we haven't pushed this further forward. It's more in terms of, I haven't worked out how we would possibly put together all the local authority data. How do we present it in such a way that isn't overwhelming for the consumer? So these are the things that I'm kind of in more than actually, the reality of how we do it. So it's fine, but yeah, we've got some work to do with it all, Phil. Okay, so we get all that information in, and then that all comes through. So this is why we say we've got, if we go to our Jasmine Dean Parkrun data set or area, you can see we've got all these data flows. See these all refreshed on the 17th, and that's kind of what's going on. So what we'll do now is we'll pause, okay, and then I'll come through after I've run the refresh and let you know. So obviously I need to wait until actually parkruns have taken place and run the refresh. This is how we build up the GUID list, okay? So I've created a Power BI report. I did it in Power BI. I could have put it into Excel, and I might even put it into Excel. The main thing is just the Excel native connectors just aren't quite there, but the M script, you can easily do it. And I just didn't feel like trying to scratch my head and manually write it all out. In terms of it, you connect to it, to a data flow, and then you just kind of delete a few steps to say, well, just get me the list of data flows. And the result is this. Okay, so where we've got data flow name and a GUID, and then all I've done is I've mapped those manually. Okay, and again, potentially if we get this right and we think, well, because by the end I'm using the URL, that potentially that's the key, isn't it? If we use df_URL, we can then automatically link those up and potentially even write something that would then push those back through. So in the event that you did something or a new one appeared that didn't exist, that we could then push those in and manually or automatically not have to do it. At the moment, it's a manual step, but there's lots of other steps that are still manual within this in terms of building these reports and doing these things. There's a few things that just I haven't optimized, and it's just been, there's not been a point, is there? You know, I'm manually doing this. It's not something that we're getting paid for. This has very much been, look, this is a retail analog, see what we're doing. But you can see the capabilities of automation are really powerful. Okay, so let's come back and see what happened after the refresh. Sunday evening. Okay, as I said at the beginning of this ended up going on a lot longer than I was wanting it to go through. Reshot the introduction and a couple of things I didn't like. Power Automate Desktop and update, and the updates for Power Automate Desktop, I will be honest, they have hit me so many times where it's just you update and then it goes, well, the update didn't actually properly happen. And you're having to kind of really uninstall the whole thing and reinstall it, which is what I had to do today to get the latest version in to work. I'm sure I uninstalled it and reinstalled it and it didn't work before. So I'm probably going to lean on keeping the Power Automate step as manual. But now what I've got is this does work, where this is triggering everything, it goes through and it runs. So we can see here, if we look at Jasmine Dean, for example, see how it is now. Zoom in a bit. So you can see we've got all the titles, all the usual stuff that we've got. There's some things that I should probably do and we would look to do as we went through and version manage this up to the next piece. One bug that I've found is this junior true false isn't working. The way it's running, it's overwriting everything as false. So I need to check, and what I'll do is I'll make sure it's writing a value there based on what was there beforehand as opposed to anything else. That's fine. It's easy enough to do. I've got the latest events. See the event here. We've got that there. I want to show you a screen grab because unfortunately, I think I was hoping that there'd be an event that didn't run, and all the events took place, which is fine. I mean, which is great. Of course we want that. There was weather warnings all the way through, saying, oh, hopefully one's not going to work. But what I've got, and I'll show you this here, I took a screen grab midway through the refresh cycle of it all as it was going through. And what you can see is we had these last update dates, but then we had here where we could see, well, these haven't been refreshed yet, or these are still, the refresh was in the past. So what we would do for our logic is we'd be saying, well, where it's a negative number, don't do it. Or if it's a positive number, do it. And that's the bit I need to work through. Because SharePoint, for obvious reasons, it says you're just pulling a list. That could be really bad. You know, I know these aren't going to be more than, say, 30, 50 at most. We're not going to get to that point, I don't think. But it works. This is running really well. So in Power Automate, the online piece, what I've done, and I've disabled a couple of flows here because these were obviously going badly wrong, or these would have conflicted with it. This has happened. We can see it takes 4.5 hours to run, and most of that is taken in the delay components. It works really well. It does a perfect job. It just went through. What I've done is I've updated the trigger. Okay, so we're saying now where a file is created or modified. So at the moment, the file created or modified is in here, and it's the refresh trigger folder. And we just got a done.txt file, and we can see here. So data pull started, data pull finished. And part of me is sitting there thinking, well, we should try and piece this together and do a log file for each one potentially, and then write it in. And I was thinking what would be nice is while the Power Automate desktop side is running through, to have that Word doc or that Notepad document, the text file, visible and writing so you can see. But obviously we don't want to write it back until the end. So I need to think through that, because we've had issues where something's failed, what's failed, why is it failed, how far did you get, what's gone through. It'd be nice to kind of have all that recorded as opposed to just to start and end. So I'll probably look at doing that at some point as well. Again, these are all, we're going to expand this further. And for this, this is kind of just my little playground area, kind of, say, what can we do? This is a retail analog of real world data. You can see real world what we're doing. Okay, but it works is the main thing. So it's gone through, it did everything. It went through, it did the full refresh. We go into here, we can see everything's refreshed today, see the times that they've all been refreshed. And then we can see as well, this Newcastle Parkrun, that it was refreshed late on. And if we go and look at the refresh history, you'll see I forgot to stop one of the data flows. Not version history. It's, refresh history. Here we go. I forgot to stop one of the data flows. So when it refreshed, which is the Town Moor one, it used to be the Town Moor, which was the slowest one to refresh. That would trigger the refresh for the whole thing. Now, the way that's running through a 10-minute cycle just didn't make sense, but it then ran through and did the rest. And you can see there's a big time difference. That's kind of the difference as it was going through for it. So it kind of makes sense. We need to be clear and make sure that we've got everything done properly. With that, so we understand now, don't we, the challenges that you face, the technical challenges of getting your automation jobs done, that kind of thing done, they're pretty trivial, right? Honestly, they are fairly trivial. Even with this, where we're saying, right, we're always going to keep this as a manual cycle because of. The because of is clear and it's clearly defined and is readily understood. I need to be clear and certain that the way the scrapes are going to run and the way that it's going to pull the data works. So manually watching the first one do it isn't a problem. It just allows us to know, well, okay, the jobs are all working correctly. All the versions, all the software are the right version. There's not an update to do, which an update, win-get is great. Win-get update -all or -all is a really solid way of doing it. But my goodness me, if you're in the middle of it, it's difficult. And if I'd fully automated it and it just doesn't run, when am I going to, then I'm not thinking I need to do it. Whereas at the moment, I'm sort of going, oh, okay, late on Saturday, I'll do it. Or first thing Sunday, I'll just trigger the refresh, watch it through. Jobs are good. And it doesn't take me much to do. The VMs are all there. It's ready to go. It just runs. So we've kind of got that structure built. Once that's done, as I say, that log file is what we're using to trigger it. And I think the step to do would be to improve that log file usage. Practically, in terms of saying, well, the log file helps, it does help. But the reality is when it breaks mid-refresh, you tend to have a web page open saying, well, this is the web page that didn't work. So you can then look and investigate the web page and see, well, what would cause it? It's, there's options, there's routes available to you. So it's not, oh, we've got no information. But it's important to think through. What I wanted you to understand with this, though, was that Power Automate will allow you to put together some quite complicated data flows quite easily, or sorry, not data flows. They used to be called flows was the problem. If you look at still flow.microsoft.com, so they're flows, and then Power BI uses data flows. And at that point, they went, oh no, we're going to call them Power Automate scripts. So they went from being called Microsoft Flow to Power Automate, which, yeah, but I'm still... So my Power Automate scripts that I built to do all this, yeah, in terms of like the head scratching, that kind of thing, no, they're not much, right? Honestly, they are pretty simple, pretty easy. The most difficult part to build with this was actually working out the best way to extract all the data from the web pages. That was the headache. That was the head scratcher. Once you crack a nut like that, you'll find the rest is really easy to do. In terms of the updated job for this that goes through and runs all this, it took a couple of hours to build. I mean, yes, it takes 4.5 hours to run, but it's doing it because it's pausing 10 minutes. It's pausing 10 minutes because we want to make sure that we don't have too many data flows going at the same time. We could experiment with that 10 minutes. We could drop it down to 5 and see, does this work? Does it cause me problems with my data flows? Does everything, yeah? And if you start to do things like that, then you'll find, well, this is okay. But the challenge that you might find is that it'll work up to a point, because obviously over time, each event is getting bigger. We are adding an additional event to it. And there isn't really a way with the traditional data flows that we're using to actually do an incremental refresh properly. It just isn't there. So we've kind of got to think through what's the right thing to do with this. This was quick, it works. And the bug, the issue, as it were, with the manual start is there because versioning within Power Automate Desktop is really clunky. And I'm sorry, there's no other way of putting it. It is really challenging to manage that and to make that work. I would not want to do or to try and run or deploy Power Automate Desktop in an enterprise situation. Likewise, there probably isn't a reason. I mean, Power Automate Desktop is kind of you. I'm a worker, I'm a power user, I know what I need to use, I've got a few things to do with it. But equally for a lot of businesses, they might think, you know what, there's a risk of having this in our business. So I'm going to leave it up to you. What we did and what I needed it for, in terms of the reading the web page components, Power Automate Desktop was the only option as opposed to anything else. And yes, you could go down the Python and the beautiful soup route and see how that works out for you. That's for you. This is putting it in a way that's fully automated and does everything, was the thing. You can decide what you want to do. Okay? If you like that and you think, wow, the way that these solutions were built, the elegance of the solution and the way it runs, let me know. Get in touch. Geordie Consulting are there to support you in your business and your organization, taking their data aspirations to the next level. You've just got a comment and you want to add something and say, oh, do you know what? This is what I'd like to see. Could you do this with the regional view? Because I'm still trying to work out what that regional report should look like. And that's really the headache I've got in terms of progressing this to the next level. The data headache's solved now. We've got this through. We can easily bring all 20 events that we've got so far into a single model. We can add more in. We can do more areas. I think there's still a few from Northumberland that I need to bring through looking at it. It's all there and ready to go. It's just now a case of working out, well, how do I produce something that looks easy and is simple enough for you, or, like let's say if it's easy enough for, say, my mum to use, who's not really IT literate, could she click through it and understand what's going on? That's kind of got to be the acid test of what we're doing, because ultimately your data insights are only insightful if they can be understood. Yeah? Good. For now, though, stay safe, take care, ta-da.